My name is Rachel Green, 41 years old, and I stood outside the church steps clutching a cream-colored envelope, watching as my ex-husband married my former best friend. The same woman who used to finish my sentences. The same man who once swore he'd never love anyone the way he loved me. I waited until the vows were done, until she smiled that smile I used to know. Then, as they turned to face the crowd, I walked down the aisle in front of everyone and handed him the letter that ended it all. "Read it out loud," I whispered. He paled. She reached for his hand, and the silence in that cathedral hit harder than any scream. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you loved, if you've ever had your heart shattered and still managed to stand tall, then this story is for you. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when the quiet woman decides not to stay quiet anymore. They thought I'd stay broken, but they didn't know what I was capable of when I finally had nothing left to lose. A week before their wedding, I received an invitation in the mail. It was addressed to me, in her handwriting. No return address, no explanation, just elegant script that read, "You're invited to celebrate the love between Emily Sanders and Daniel Green." I remember sitting on my kitchen floor, clutching that envelope like it was a shard of glass. My coffee had gone cold. My dog, Jasper, nudged my knee, and I couldn't stop staring at those names, hers and his, written side by side as if they hadn't gutted me 6 months ago. They had both vanished from my life like smoke. No warning, no confrontation, just absence. I had cried for weeks thinking something was wrong with me, that I wasn't enough, not as a wife, not as a friend. And now they wanted me to celebrate their union? The kind of arrogance you only see in people who never expect consequences. It wasn't even a lavish wedding, just a modest church downtown, old bricks, white hydrangeas lining the steps. The same church where Daniel and I had renewed our vows on our 10th anniversary. That was the part that broke something deep inside me. They weren't just starting fresh. They were recycling memories that used to belong to me. I remember lying in bed that night, clutching the invitation with trembling hands, and something shifted. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to burn anything or cause a scene. No, I was going to write. The kind of letter that doesn't beg or plead. The kind that tells the truth in a voice so calm, it shatters everything around it. I poured myself a glass of wine, pulled out my old stationery drawer, and began writing everything they never thought I'd say. Every secret I knew, every moment of hypocrisy, every lie they whispered behind my back, believing I'd never find out. By the time I finished the letter, dawn had already broken. I sealed it in an envelope, cream-colored, just like their invitation. I pressed wax on the flap, and I waited. The morning of the wedding, I wore a simple black dress. Not out of mourning, out of clarity. I walked into that church like a ghost resurrected, not to haunt, but to witness. They didn't see me at first. The organ played, the crowd murmured. Emily walked down the aisle like a queen. Daniel beamed, stupid with love or pride. Maybe both. And as the priest said, "If anyone has a reason these two should not be joined," I didn't speak. Not then. I just waited. Let them finish their vows. Let them speak their lies in God's house. And when the final kiss was sealed, I walked forward. Slow. Poised. Silent. The envelope was warm in my hand. When I reached them, Daniel looked like he'd seen a ghost. Emily's smile froze. The crowd fell quiet, like they were holding their breath. "Congratulations," I said softly, extending the letter to Daniel. He didn't take it, so I dropped it into his breast pocket. "You might want to read that before the reception," I added, loud enough for the first 2 rows to hear. And then I turned and walked away. Down the aisle, past the stunned crowd, past the whispers and widened eyes. Not a single tear fell, because I had already wept enough. This time, I left them with the mess. You're probably wondering what I wrote in that letter. Don't worry, we'll get there. But first, let me take you back to when I still believed in best friends who never lied. Back to when I thought love meant loyalty. Back to the moment when I handed my trust to two people, and they dropped it like it meant nothing. Because before I handed over that letter, before the silence in that church, before the mask slipped off both of them, there was once a woman who thought she had it all. And it started, of all places, with a dinner party. Before the silence in that church, before the letter, before the black dress, I was just Rachel. Wife, friend, organizer of birthday dinners, rememberer of anniversaries no one else bothered to write down. I lived in a modest house at the edge of a sleepy suburb in New Jersey, where the neighbors waved when they mowed their lawns and you always knew who baked which casserole at the Sunday potluck. My life wasn't flashy, but it was real, grounded. I took care of things, not because anyone asked me to, but because it felt right. Daniel was the kind of man who wore confidence like cologne. He never asked twice, never apologized if he forgot something. He always said he was too busy thinking big. And me? I made the small things run smoothly so he could do that. So he could think big. I paid the bills on time, left sticky notes in his car reminding him to call his mother, booked the vet appointments, and made sure the car never ran out of gas. I remembered the color of his favorite tie before every presentation and kept a spare button in my purse just in case it popped. That's the kind of love I knew how to give. The quiet, invisible kind. And Emily? She was the only one who ever really seemed to see it. She was my best friend for 15 years. We met in college. Two awkward girls in an intro to sociology class, bonding over bad coffee and mutual imposter syndrome. We were never competitive. She was more spontaneous. I was more grounded. She was fire, I was earth. And we worked. At least I thought we did. Emily was the kind of friend who made people feel like they were the only person in the room. She had a way of tilting her head just slightly when she listened, as if she were tuning into your exact frequency. People loved her, sometimes too much. But I never worried. Not about Daniel, not about her. Not even when they'd laugh a little too long at dinner parties. That's how betrayal works, doesn't it? It never arrives like a storm. It builds slowly, silently, in the pauses between glances, in the words that aren't said. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no one's is, but it was functional, familiar. We had rituals, morning coffee in silence, weekend grocery runs where he always forgot the list, Thursday night reruns of The Office, even when we'd seen them a dozen times. He never complained about me, but he never complimented me either. I was appreciated the way you appreciate working plumbing. Valuable. Taken for granted. Still, I didn't need roses or long monologues. I just wanted steadiness. Loyalty. And for a while, I believed I had that. One night, about a year before everything fell apart, Emily and I sat on the patio after Daniel had gone to bed. We were sipping wine, wrapped in fleece blankets, fire pit crackling between us. She looked at me over her glass and said, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if you had been just a little more selfish?" I laughed and shrugged. "I don't think I know how to be." She didn't laugh, just stared at the flames like they were whispering something. "I envy you sometimes," she said finally. "You know how to stay. I always want to run." I didn't realize that was the first goodbye. Looking back, the signs were small, almost invisible. Like the time Daniel came home late from work, smelling like the vanilla candle Emily always burned in her apartment. He said it was from a coworker's birthday cake. I didn't press it. Or the time Emily canceled our monthly brunch last minute, claiming she had a headache, but later posted a photo from a wine tasting on her Instagram story, tagged only with a vague quote, "Some secrets are worth keeping." I still didn't connect it. That's the thing about people who trust deeply. We don't scan for danger. We look for reasons to believe. I taught third grade at a local public school. My students called me Miss Rachel and drew me pictures with crooked hearts and stick figures that had way too many fingers. I loved my job. Not because it was easy, but because it made me feel purposeful, like I was shaping something. Some days, I'd come home exhausted, my hair pulled into a frizzy bun, my shoes covered in glitter from an art project. And Daniel wouldn't even look up from his laptop. "How was your day?" I'd ask, dropping my bag by the door. He'd grunt. "Busy." No questions back. No, "Did you eat lunch?" No real noticing. Just the ambient sound of a man who had already exited the marriage in spirit. He was just waiting for the right excuse to exit in form. Emily, on the other hand, still made me feel seen. At least she used to. She'd drop by with flowers, send me funny memes late at night, ask about my students. Sometimes we'd lie on the couch and watch old movies like we did in college, quoting every line of Notting Hill like it was sacred scripture. She used to call me her forever person, and I stupidly believed that meant something. There was one day, I remember it so clearly, when the three of us had brunch together. I made lemon ricotta pancakes. Emily showed up wearing a new shade of lipstick, berry red, not her usual nude. Daniel noticed. "That color looks good on you," he said casually, pouring syrup. She blushed, waved him off. "You think? It's kind of bold for me." He smiled. "Bold works on you." I smiled too, but something sank in my chest that morning, because he hadn't complimented me in over a year. Our 10th anniversary passed quietly. No flowers, no dinner reservation, just a half-hearted happy anniversary as he left for work. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night with a candle burning anyway. I still made dinner, still wore the dress he once said made me look like a summer evening. He didn't notice. He ate in silence, watched TV, fell asleep on the couch. That night, I lay awake next to a man whose back was turned toward me, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was what love turned into, a long, slow fading into indifference. I didn't tell anyone I was unhappy, not even Emily. I thought I could fix it by being better, more patient, more attractive, more something. But no matter how much I tried, I felt like a vase in a house full of dust, once admired, now background. And still, I stayed. Because that's what I do. I stay, I give, I endure, until I don't. Now you know what my world looked like before the cracks turned into shatters. Before I found the receipt for a hotel room in Daniel's jacket pocket. Before Emily stopped responding to my texts for 3 weeks straight. Before I walked into a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon and saw them, together, laughing like teenagers, her hand resting on his like it had always belonged there. I stood outside the window with my chest hollowed out and my knees weak, and I knew. I knew everything. And no one even noticed I was standing there. That was the moment something inside me started to shift. Not rage. Not yet. Just the quiet beginning of awakening. And from that day forward, I started keeping score. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because love is not blind. It's just polite, until it's not. It was a charity gala. One of those smug suburban events where everyone wears rented elegance and pretends their wine donations will heal the world. Emily had invited me, oddly enough. It was for her company. She was doing PR now for some boutique wellness brand, all crystals and overpriced candles. The invitation had landed in my inbox like a dare. "Would love to catch up. You should come, Rach. It's been too long." She signed it with a heart, like nothing had happened. I stared at that email for 2 days before deciding to go. Not because I missed her, not because I wanted closure, but because I needed to see them together with my own eyes, to confirm what my gut already screamed. So I went. I wore navy blue, classy, structured. The kind of dress that didn't scream for attention, but made it impossible to ignore the woman wearing it. I walked in alone, head high, eyes forward, and there they were. Daniel had his hand on her lower back. She was laughing. The too loud kind. The kind you do when you want the whole room to know you're fine. Thriving, even. Their bodies were too close for just friends. Their chemistry too seamless to be new. They weren't in hiding. They were debuting. And the entire room, everyone I had ever hosted for dinner, everyone who used to call me Rachel the Glue, was watching them the way people watch fireworks. Emily spotted me first. Her smile flickered, just for a second, But it was enough. She elbowed Daniel. He turned, met my eyes. No apology. No guilt. Just a smug little tilt of his chin, like I was the one intruding. And then he did something I'll never forget. He raised his glass. To new beginnings, he mouthed. My blood went cold. It wasn't just betrayal. It was performance. They were rewriting the story, framing themselves as the brave lovers who followed their hearts. I was just the footnote, the forgettable ex-wife too dull to keep his attention. And they wanted me to watch, to see how easily I'd been replaced, to see how completely they had moved on, together. I didn't make a scene. That's not who I am. But I watched. I watched her lean into him the way she used to lean into me. I watched him whisper in her ear the way he used to whisper in mine. I watched them hold court with the same charm they once used to build our circle of friends, the circle I was now clearly outside of. And I noticed things no one else seemed to see. How he used my jokes, stories I'd told at dinner parties, now recycled for new laughs. How she wore a necklace I'd once given her for her birthday, a simple gold chain she had called timeless. How they moved through the room like they had nothing to hide, because in their minds, they didn't. They had already rewritten the script. Emily was the brave woman who finally realized she'd loved him all along. Daniel was the man who couldn't deny his heart, and I was the ghost they'd already buried. Except I wasn't gone. I was standing right there, alive, silent, and watching. Toward the end of the night, as the crowd thinned and people started saying their goodbyes, Emily approached me, alone. Her heels clicked on the marble floor like punctuation marks. She stopped 2 feet from me, clutching a flute of champagne, and gave me that smile. Soft, rehearsed, sweet as arsenic. "I'm really glad you came," she said. "I know this. Must be weird." Weird. I stared at her. Weird is one word. She nodded, like I'd just said something poetic. "I just didn't want you to find out the wrong way. We never meant for it to happen this way." I almost laughed. "You never meant for what to happen? For you to fall in love? Or for me to find out?" Emily's face twitched. "I know it hurts, Rachel. But love is messy. You and Daniel were already drifting apart, and he..." "He what?" I cut in, voice low. "He fell into your bed by accident?" Her eyes darted away. "We didn't plan this." "No, you just didn't stop it." There was a pause, and then she delivered the final blow. "We're getting married." My stomach dropped. "And I want you to be okay. I want us to move forward." I blinked. "You're inviting me to your wedding? I'm inviting you to let go," she said. "For your own peace." Peace. As if peace was a gift she could hand me from her high ground. I didn't say another word. I just nodded, slowly, like I was accepting the terms. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not victory, not smugness, but a shadow of fear. Because deep down, she knew. She had taken something that wasn't hers. And no matter how many candles she lit or crystals she bought, something about it would always rot from the inside. A week later, a mutual friend posted a photo on Instagram. Daniel and Emily holding hands in front of a Save the Date board. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I finally felt something sharper than sadness. Clarity. They weren't sorry. They weren't hiding. They wanted to erase me and smile while they did it. That's when I started writing the letter. Not the one I handed him at the altar. This one was raw, spiteful, a full-on purge. I wrote every ugly thought, every curse, every insult, and then I ripped it up, because rage fades, and I didn't want them to fade with it. I wanted something they'd never outrun. Truth, but delivered with silence, with elegance, with timing. So I waited. I played the part. I sent a polite RSVP. I chose a tasteful dress. And when the day came, when the organ played, when the crowd stood, when the man who once vowed forever to me turned to vow it again to someone else, I was ready. I had written a new letter. not out of revenge, but out of clarity. It held no accusations, no dramatic flourishes, just truths, neatly arranged, chronological, undeniable. One paragraph for every month they lied. One sentence for every detail I had quietly collected. The hotel receipt, the duplicate playlist, the secret Instagram messages she forgot to delete from her cloud. I listed it all, not to humiliate, but to document. And at the end I wrote, "This is not a plea. This is not a scream. This is just the sound of everything you thought would stay hidden, finally breathing." That's the letter I slipped into Daniel's pocket. That's the reason he went pale at the altar. Why Emily clutched his arm like something was slipping. Because when you build love on betrayal, even a whisper can feel like an earthquake. And I, the quiet one, the background character, the forgotten ex-wife, had just become the author of their reckoning. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to sabotage. All I had to do was tell the truth and hand it over in an envelope. And as I walked out of that church, heels echoing on stone, back straight, I knew they had messed with the wrong woman. After the gala, after the confession, after the final flicker of guilt died in Emily's eyes, I stopped asking why it happened, why he left, why she did it, why they thought I'd disappear. None of that mattered anymore. What mattered was what came next. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one caught off guard. I didn't want revenge, not in the traditional sense. No social media exposé, no wine-fueled text storms, no tearful confrontations in parking lots. What I wanted was clarity and control. So I started with the smallest act of rebellion. I stopped explaining myself to anyone. I declined brunch invites with vague smiles, stopped answering curious texts, avoided the accidental run-ins at the grocery store, where mutual friends would hover too long by the produce asking if I was doing okay. Let them wonder. Let them fill in the blanks with whatever version made them feel most comfortable. Meanwhile, I was writing. Not rage letters, not even journals. I wrote facts, timelines, receipts, details. I compiled a quiet little archive, a copy of the joint credit card statement showing hotel charges in a different city during the week. Daniel said he was on a corporate retreat. Screenshots of Emily's Pinterest board, filled with wedding ideas, dated 2 months before Daniel and I separated. Email timestamps, dinner reservations, blurry photos tagged without context. Individually, they were just fragments. But together, they told a story neither of them would be able to deny. I wasn't planning to use it, not yet. But I wanted the option. That's the thing about power. Sometimes just knowing you have it is enough. My lawyer, Melissa, was a friend of a friend. Soft-spoken, razor-sharp, and allergic to small talk. I liked her instantly. When I told her everything, the affair, the timeline, the receipts, she tapped her pen twice and asked only one question. "Do you want to bury them or free yourself?" "Both," I said. She didn't flinch. Over the next few weeks, she helped me sort out everything Daniel had left behind in the mess of our separation. The joint investments I'd helped grow, but he'd tried to keep quiet. The early drafts of our divorce agreement, where he lowballed my share of the house we both paid into. The copyright on a small side business I helped him launch, one he now claimed I had no part in. With Melissa's help, I renegotiated everything, quietly. We amended the divorce filing, filed motions he didn't notice until much later, and froze a few assets until proper accounting could be done. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to pay attention. Daniel, assuming I was too heartbroken to read the fine print, had left a dozen open doors, and I walked through every one of them. Meanwhile, I worked on myself. Not the spa day, yoga retreat kind of work. The invisible kind. I went back to therapy. Started cooking for one with intention, not loneliness. Deleted old playlists and made new ones with songs that didn't remind me of him. I even went back to painting, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago when Daniel said, "That's cute, babe, but you don't really have the time for that anymore." Now I made the time. Every Sunday afternoon, I'd lose myself in brushstrokes and silence. No one to interrupt me, no one to need me, just space. And slowly, something in me began to breathe again. 3 months before the wedding, I received a call from Emily's sister, Claire. We weren't close, but we'd shared a few holidays. She sounded hesitant. "Hey, I don't mean to stir anything, but I just found out you're not in the bridal party." I laughed. "I think we're past the bridesmaid phase, don't you?" She exhaled. "Yeah? I thought you should know they're telling people you moved on. That you blessed their relationship? That you gave your approval?" I closed my eyes. Of course they were. Revisionist history was their favorite language. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. And that's when I knew exactly what to do. It wasn't about public humiliation. I didn't want an audience for the fallout. What I wanted was for them to feel what I had felt. The ground shifting, the breath catching, the slow, creeping horror of realizing you are not as untouchable as you thought. But I wanted it delivered the same way they gave it to me, with a smile, with civility. So I went back to the letter. Not the first draft, not the angry one. I started from scratch. I opened with a simple sentence. "You probably thought I wouldn't come." And then I built it, piece by piece, like a quiet, ticking clock. No accusations, no venom, just truth, in full paragraphs. Calm, measured, devastating. I didn't even sign it with my name, just a closing line. There is nothing louder than the truth whispered in the right moment. Meanwhile, I RSVP'd to the wedding. Yes, with pleasure. Let them believe I was over it. Let them think I'd come to clap and smile and fade back into the shadows. I even sent them a gift. A crystal vase, hand-blown, elegant. With a card that read, "May this never shatter." Emily posted it on her Instagram story with a heart emoji and a caption that said, "When the past is healed, the future opens." It was almost too easy. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early. I sat 2 rows back, heels crossed, hands folded. I watched them take photos, greet guests, glide through the crowd like royalty. I noticed the cracks. Daniel looked tired. Emily was snapping at the coordinator. People whispered about how fast it had all happened, about how neatly I'd stepped aside. No one knew I hadn't stepped aside. I had just stepped back. There's a difference. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged. And just as the priest announced them husband and wife, I rose. I walked calmly down the aisle, the envelope in hand. Daniel's smile faltered. Emily blinked like she wasn't sure if she was imagining me. I reached the altar, met his eyes, and pressed the letter into his chest pocket. "Read it before the reception," I whispered. Then I turned and walked away, not rushed, not flustered, just done. But they had no idea that the letter would make it to someone else before he had the chance to bury it. Because poetic justice isn't just about being right. It's about timing. Weddings are supposed to be warm, joyful, cleansing. But the air inside that cathedral turned still, almost metallic, the moment I walked down the aisle and slipped the envelope into Daniel's suit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break a single vow. I simply delivered the truth and let it breathe. I watched his fingers touch the envelope as if it burned. I saw Emily glance at him, confused, her smile twitching just slightly at the corners. And I turned away, because my part was done. The rest would unravel without me. The letter didn't reach just Daniel. He thought it did. He opened it alone in the groom's suite, behind a locked door while guests clinked champagne flutes and posed for photos on the church steps. But by the time he read the second paragraph, a copy had already reached 3 other people. Melissa, my lawyer, had sent them, by certified email, scheduled to arrive the moment their ceremony ended. One to his business partner, one to his father, and one to the editor of the local paper where Emily had just been profiled in their 30 Under 30 feature for ethical storytelling and values-based branding. Each copy came with attachments. A timeline of their affair with corresponding receipts, messages, hotel stays, and the date stamp on their wedding Pinterest board. A memo outlining Daniel's unauthorized use of joint marital funds during our legal separation, funds he'd siphoned to cover their early honeymoon deposit, and an affidavit, signed by a notary, verifying that I had been his legal spouse for the majority of the affair. No accusations, just facts. Undeniable. Documented. Time-stamped. I didn't ask for a headline. I didn't ask for revenge. I simply made it impossible for them to continue lying. And the moment he read the letter, his hands trembling, eyes darting from sentence to sentence, Daniel knew his silence had expired. I didn't see the fallout directly. I wasn't in the reception hall when the whispers started, but I've imagined it enough times to almost feel like I was there. Daniel reappeared late, pale, sweating, like he'd aged 10 years in 20 minutes. Emily reached for his hand, all smiles. "Everything okay?" He didn't respond. And that's when the first phone buzzed. His father, across the room, lifted his phone and frowned. Then another buzz. And another. The photographer's assistant reading something on his screen, glancing up. Emily's maid of honor pulling her aside with a tight expression. A ripple. Not panic. Not yet. Just discomfort. That eerie quiet when people realize the room has changed temperature. Then the editor called Emily's phone directly. She stepped out to take it, returned pale, eyes wide, phone shaking in her hand. And then she saw Daniel, still holding the letter, still too stunned to speak. The truth hit her harder than she expected. Not just the affair, not just the shame, but the fact that I hadn't tried to stop them. I'd simply waited. Waited for the perfect moment to let them destroy each other. By the next morning, 3 things happened. The local paper issued a quiet update to Emily's profile, removing her feature without explanation. Daniel's business partner announced a temporary restructuring due to internal concerns, effectively removing Daniel from the board, and I received a wire transfer for the full amount of my renegotiated settlement, plus interest. I never asked for the extra. But guilt is expensive, and legal leverage is louder than any apology. A week later, Emily tried to contact me. She left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling, and yet still laced with the same tone she always used when trying to control a narrative. "I know you're angry," she said. "But this was cruel, Rachel. We didn't deserve that. Not like this. Not like this." As if betrayal should be returned with decorum. As if her public persona deserved to be preserved while she shattered mine in private. I didn't call her back, but I saved the message, just in case. Daniel never reached out. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to say, or maybe he finally understood that I wasn't the weak one in the story. He'd mistaken my silence for surrender. But silence, when chosen, is its own kind of warfare. A few months passed. The wedding photos never appeared online. Friends whispered about how fast things collapsed. Emily lost 2 major clients. Daniel was reportedly consulting out of state, far from anyone who knew the full story. And me? I was fine. Better than fine. I sold the house and bought a smaller one on a hill overlooking the town. It's quiet, sun-drenched, full of corners where the light hits just right when I paint. I kept Jasper. He still snores like a freight train. I started teaching art part-time at a community center. Kids who don't care about symmetry or technique, just color and chaos. It's messy. And it's mine. Some nights, I reread the letter. Not out of spite. Not to relive the betrayal. But to remind myself how powerful it is to choose dignity. To know the difference between a reaction and a decision. People sometimes ask me if I'd take him back, or if I miss her. The answer is simple, no. Because what I had with them was real, to me. But what they had with each other? That's the part that was always fake. They mistook chemistry for love, secrecy for intimacy, convenience for destiny. But the truth always outlives the lie. And I had no intention of chasing them down for justice. I let it come to them, dressed in silence, sealed in an envelope. There's a kind of revenge that doesn't taste like blood or fire. It tastes like peace, like finally being seen, like watching the ones who tried to erase you realize you were the author all along. I didn't ruin their wedding. They did. I just brought the mirror. And in it, they saw themselves. Clearly, finally, completely. And that was all I needed. It was almost poetic, how it happened. 3 weeks after their wedding fell apart, I ran into Emily. Not in some dramatic showdown or orchestrated moment, just life doing what life does, folding people into each other's paths when they least expect it. I was at the Saturday farmers market, the one downtown by the old library, picking up fresh dahlias and sourdough. The air smelled like lavender soap and cinnamon apples. It was the kind of crisp morning that makes you feel whole, even if you don't know why. I turned the corner by the honey stall, and there she was, alone. Emily Sanders. Or was it Green now? That detail felt irrelevant. She looked off. Not unkempt, not disheveled, just tired. Like the shine had worn off. Like someone who had spent weeks trying to patch up a public image and was finally losing grip on the edges. Her posture was tense. She clutched a bouquet of eucalyptus like a shield. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and when they landed on me, they froze. We stood there, just a few feet apart, surrounded by the bustle of people bartering over peaches and homemade jams. But in that space between us, it was silent. A silence she wasn't prepared for. "Rachel?" she said first, voice strained, thin. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her mouth twitched like she was waiting for a cue, a greeting, a release. But I just looked at her, calm, unmoved. She shifted her weight. "I didn't think I'd see you here." Still, I said nothing. My gaze held hers, steady, not cold, just present. She took a breath. "I assume you know everything now." It was such a pitiful thing to say, as if she were the one offering clarity, as if the truth hadn't already been exposed and laid bare, not by scandal, but by precision. My precision. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Emily's mask began to falter. "You had every right to be angry," she added, her voice brittle now. "But the way you did it?" She stopped herself, then laughed softly, nervously. "You always were the quiet one. I should have known." That made me tilt my head, just slightly. The same way she used to tilt hers when she listened to people, pretending to hear them fully. That small signature gesture she used when she wanted to seem gentle, kind. I mirrored it, and let the silence continue. Her eyes darkened. "What, nothing to say?" she asked, her tone breaking now. "You destroy my wedding, send our private life to half the people in town, and you just get to walk around like you're the victim?" A few people turned to glance. Her voice was rising, too sharp for this crowd, too raw. But I didn't react. I let her words hang there. I let her anger build, because silence, when rooted in truth, is unbearable to the guilty. She looked at me like she wanted to scream, but all I did was raise one eyebrow, a single, deliberate arch, the same way she used to do when I'd overshare something during our wine nights, and she wanted to seem amused but superior. Now I returned the gesture, and her face crumpled, just for a flash. "I thought we were friends," she whispered, softer now. And that was the moment her mask fell completely. Because beneath all the self-justification, all the Instagram quotes about love finding a way, all the curated narratives she'd built to make betrayal sound like destiny, Emily was finally staring at something she couldn't control. A woman she had tried to erase, who now stood taller without saying a word. "I didn't think you had this in you," she said quietly. And there it was. The real confession. Not an apology. Not remorse. Just a stunned admission that she had underestimated me, that she had assumed I would break, disappear, cry behind closed doors and pretend to forgive for the sake of keeping the peace. She thought silence meant weakness. But today, standing in front of her, bouquet in one hand, fresh bread in the other, back straight and eyes clear, I watched her finally understand the truth. My silence was the loudest thing she'd ever hear. I nodded once, not out of agreement, but acknowledgement. Then I turned. And I walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. And behind me, I heard her breathing shift. That tiny, panicked inhale that happens when someone realizes the conversation didn't end the way they wanted it to. Because sometimes the harshest confrontation is no confrontation at all. Later that week, I ran into Daniel. He was at the bank, of all places, standing in line with his arms crossed and jaw set. He didn't see me at first, but when he turned and our eyes met, his whole body stiffened. He gave me the nod men give when they don't know what else to say. A nod that means please don't make this harder. I smiled politely, just a twitch of the lips. Then I stepped ahead of him in line, not rudely, just directly, and held my ground. He didn't protest. A year ago, he would have told me to wait my turn, would have explained how business accounts took priority, would have used his booming voice to stake his place. But now? Now he just stood behind me, silent. And when I left the counter, I didn't say goodbye. Because the truth is, the moment I handed him that letter, I said everything I needed to. There's no confrontation more powerful than a woman who no longer needs closure, because she became it. I think people assume revenge looks like screaming, or slamming doors, or torching everything to the ground. But sometimes it looks like this: holding your dignity in rooms where they expected you to beg, meeting their gaze without blinking, becoming unshakable. I didn't destroy them. I didn't leak secrets or ruin reputations. I simply gave them the truth and let them sit with it. They thought I'd come back for an apology, or maybe a second chance. But I didn't need either. I already had what they'd never get back: peace. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end in stillness. Like the final ripple of water after a storm has passed, quiet, clear, and undisturbed. That's how it felt in the months that followed. No announcements, no victories posted for public consumption. Just the slow settling of dust as I stepped out of their shadow and back into my own life. I never saw Emily again after the farmer's market. She stopped showing up in social circles. Her social media turned sparse. No more selfies with candles or poetic captions about alignment and authentic love. Just silence. Daniel, I heard, moved out of town shortly after. Rumor had it he took a consulting job in a city where no one knew his name, where he could build something new without the echo of what he'd left behind. They both vanished from my world the same way they had once entered it, quietly and without permission. But this time, I wasn't holding the grief. They were. One afternoon in early spring, I found the original copy of the letter. The one I had printed on heavy paper, sealed with wax, and slipped into Daniel's pocket like a loaded secret. It was tucked in the back of my desk drawer, beneath old receipts and faded notebooks, exactly where I'd left it after mailing the others. I read it again. Not because I needed to, not because the wound still ached, but because I wanted to remember what it sounded like to speak without begging, to write without flinching, to claim my voice in the softest tone and still be heard. The last line hit me just as hard as it did when I first wrote it. There is nothing louder than the truth whispered in the right moment. I folded the letter back up, slid it into an envelope, and this time I didn't seal it. I placed it gently in the fireplace and lit a match. The flame caught slowly, curling the edges before devouring the ink. Not violently, not rushed. Just the way healing happens. Steady, quiet, inevitable. I watched it burn until nothing was left but ash. Then I stood up and opened every window in my house. Let the smoke drift out into the world. Let the air carry it wherever it needed to go. Not to punish, not to haunt, just to release. Life became simple again, but never small. I painted more. I taught more classes. I grew basil on the windowsill and learned how to bake lemon tarts that didn't collapse in the middle. I didn't date, not right away. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to fill the space with noise. I liked the quiet. I liked sitting with a glass of wine and a blank canvas, knowing that no one could take this piece from me. Because I had built it myself. No shortcuts, no lies, no borrowed time. Just me. One Sunday morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. It was from one of Daniel's former co-workers, a woman I barely knew but had spoken to at one or two office events. She wrote, "I just wanted to say thank you. Not for what happened, but for how you handled it. You showed a lot of us what grace looks like. You reminded me that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means choice." I read that line twice, then folded the letter and placed it inside the back of a book I loved. A novel about a woman who loses everything and finds herself. It felt fitting, because the truth is, I didn't just lose a husband and a friend. I lost the version of me who believed I had to be small to be loved, who believed I had to be silent to be safe, who believed survival meant staying in the room, even when no one was listening. That version of me was gone. And in her place stood someone who didn't need applause, didn't need revenge, just needed freedom. One afternoon, I took a walk to the same church where it all came undone. Not for closure. I already had that. I just wanted to see the building one more time. To prove to myself that even the most painful places lose their power when you stop giving them meaning. The doors were open. The space was empty. Dust floated through the air like tiny ghosts. I stood at the back of the aisle, the same aisle I'd walked down in silence, and I smiled. Not a victorious smile. Not smug, just content. Because this place no longer held my grief, it held my transformation. The pews were the same, the altar unchanged, but I was different. And that's what mattered. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. True revenge, the kind that settles the soul, isn't cold at all. It's warm. It's the warmth of knowing you never stooped, never screamed, never lost yourself just to make someone else feel small. It's the warmth of walking away with your head high, your heart whole, and your silence intact. It's burning the letter and opening the window. It's standing in the ruins of what they built on lies and choosing not to rebuild with the same stones. That's justice. That's peace. And that's the end of this chapter.